Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, yada yada. Um, One of the more interesting settings that emerges in the Rifts rulebooks as you go through the series is Rifts Poland. It doesn't have a book in and of itself, but if you combine just the right books, you kind of get this kind of picture of one of the few empty spots on the map where player characters actually could build something of their own as they progress through things. Poland, as in the real world, is a land that has long been fucked by its geography, and in the Rifts world, it's kind of a crossroads and epicenter for a lot of the ongoing struggles. It's only got one kingdom of humans of note within its territory, based around Tarnow, and their leadership's a little cuckoo because of a magic item that it's kind of like the Philosopher's Stone, except instead of turning things into gold, it turns materials into MDC materials, so they're able to cheaply crank out mega damage armor and vehicles and stuff. But like the internal workings of their stuff is still relatively primitive and just like early 21st century kind of tech, like we have nowadays. Maybe even a little bit smidge more primitive. To their east, you have the new German Republic and Triax, and its ongoing conflict with the Gargoyle Empire. And Tarnow's east, you have all the big marauding warlord gangs of Russia, as well as the little pocket city-states that are all part of the Sovietsky. And south is the Carpathian Mountains in Romania, and the lands of old Yugoslavia and Chechnya and shit like that. So that's where the Broadkill Empire is, and where you get Mindworks and the Angel of Death, which pretty the core, most important book to be able to do a Polish setting and Rifts is Sourcebooks 3 Mindworks, because it gives you like the central signature villain that calls that region home. As said, NGR and Triax are important, so getting the 2 Triax books is kind of pretty essential to be able to run a Polish setting. I'm not actually a real big fan of the NGR. I tend to more take the Gargoyle side in that whole conflict, albeit the Broadkill are a different question, and I'm not on their side. The Gargoyles have kind of a history of being like enslaved in hell and all that kind of stuff, and so they're a bit rough around the edges, but I feel like they actually have like a more heroic ends to what they're looking to do there in Europe than the weird oddity that is the NGR, where like human civilization, North American civilization, because the coalition really isn't United States. The coalition is both, a chunk of United States and Canadian civilization, and how it was filtered through the apocalypse. And as we all know, it's openly turned rather fascist and harsh, and very paranoid and closed-minded. And the NGR in many ways is similar, but they have a more pleasant face on it all. And in a weird way, like they kind of just survived. I mean, like most of their cities were destroyed, but those that survived in the various bunkers around the Triax Company and all that kind of stuff, and the few surviving cities that were far enough away from the ley lines to have not been immediately wiped out, they kind of just rebuilt Germany as is in the middle of all the madness that is Rifts, and have just been fighting everything off at bay. And like in Russia, you either have like the big marauding territories of these cyborg, wasteland golden horde types, and then their little pocket city states of their little techno bunkers have kind of like re-embraced the old Soviet motif, and in their own strange way, they're probably like actually the most open-minded and positive of the various northern hemisphere human techno bunkers in the Rift civilization. I guess the other one of note would be Colombia, who've also kind of like I mean, they do stuff like they have the anti-monsters and stuff like that. Like they're a bit less like harsh on magic, and kind of grudgingly accept DBs. So maybe but there's a hostility still in the population towards the alien, whereas the Sovietsky, like, actively tries to give them citizenship, if at least they're of a type of DB that has proven itself to be, like friends of man kind of a thing. Because of the city of Kaliningrad, this book is also very essential to being able to pull off a Polish setting properly. I also would argue that if you want to have characters from Poland with very humble beginnings, then the Kingdom of Tarnow is a possibility for player characters to start out at and being from, but that you're gonna have to like limit their options to kind of reflect what kind of like a backwoods hillbilly town Tarnow still really is. Whereas like, Sovietsky, I think, is one of your two main options for how to get a group of player characters that are relatively from the region and invested in the region to be adventuring around in Poland, by having them playing characters from Kaliningrad, which is in regular conflict with the Broadkill, as are the warlords, and also like translates well throughout like the timeline of Rifts, if whether you're trying to start things off at 101 of PA, or if you're wanting to take things up through to the start of the Mining War and 110 PA. It's not a complete world book. It just only describes the Sovietsky. There's two other books to pull off Russia, even if you only just need the easternmost slice of it, and also some of the break-off states like Lithuania and Belarus and stuff like that, and Ukraine. So Mystic Russia has like the Russian variant on Gypsies, which I personally kind of prefer over the version as presented in the Triax and NGR book. And Warlords of Russia, which is another one of those Rifts books that I feel is like it's undersold. Like Russia is actually kind of a compelling setting within Rifts. It wasn't as immediately hit as hard as some of the other zones, and so of the Earth, some places were just immediately and forever changed abruptly into like nearly alien, landscapes, and other places literally like locked off from the rest of the Earth, or super saturated, or like Earth was abruptly fucked when the cataclysm began at the end of the 21st century. But Russia was kind of relatively isolated from that, so for them, it was like the slow creep of first like the nuclear winter, and it took a while for the monsters and the weirdness to actually come into their regions and stuff. So it was more of a slow collapse. They've maintained like bionic technology as their primary way of like equalizing themselves to the horrors from the Rifts and all that kind of stuff. And it is something kind of between the Golden Horde and a return to the feudal political system of old Russia that is reflected in the society presented in Warlords of Russia. Also, like an option for player characters, certainly a couple of the warlords from the easternmost areas operate out of Minsk and Kiev and stuff like that. Have interest in direct interaction with the borders of Poland and what goes on in there. So it's worth picking up. Now, if you want to incorporate a few other things, Rifts Underseas for the Not Ill, it's mentioned in Megaverse and Flames that there is also a Not Ill presence in the Baltic Seas, just off of Poland's coast. So just for that alone, and the fact that Tarnow does have kind of like its own kind of crappy navy, Rifts Underseas wouldn't be a bad thing to pick up. Some of the surrounding lands, like Romania and Scandinavia, aren't terribly fleshed out in Rifts lore. So that could be a good excuse to bring in stuff like you can bring in the Scandinavian Asgardian style elves from Pantheons of the Megaverse, and maybe even working stuff with one or two of the Asgardian gods out of that book. Or you can pull in vampires from the vampire source world book and source books, since they have said that there's some sort of vampire intelligence still operating in Romania a couple times. Also, potentially through the Risk Conversion book or a copy of Palladium Fantasy, you can port over the Wolfen, who are said to have like a civilization that's growing in Italy that's very Roman-styled. Now, if you want to, do the Megaverse and Flame thing, then obviously you're going to need Megaverse and Flames. The Polish part of the theater is less directly impacted at the beginning of the war. One of the Devil Lords, Sathena, has embedded herself and partnered up with the Angel of Death and Mindworks to gain leverage and control over the Broadkill army. But for now, her army is not operating quite as openly and brazenly as some of the other factions of the Minion War. So you'd kind of have to know what you want to be doing with the NGR and the Gargoyles to the east. Are they still fighting each other while also fighting with the demons and devils? Or are you going to go forward with that plot line that's suggested, where kind of a armistice and truce, for the duration of this conflict kind of thing get cut between the NGR and the Gargoyle Empire, just so hey, it's okay for us to kill each other, but stay the fuck out of our fight. We'll team up against you, kind of a thing. And how you want things to go with Hell Lord Heartripper and Queen Marauder. My own personal intuition is that Queen Marauder is probably going to fail hard at trying to convert the Gargoyle Empire over into joining her. And so I feel like even though she should stay a presence because she's a cool character to use as an NPC, she should still have a presence and whatever stories are going on with Megaverse and Flames in Central Europe. But I think it'd be funny if she loses her army of harpies rather quickly. Heartripper, not my favorite one, but also he's in France, so it's France. Less relevant directly to Megaverse and Flames. A thing that if you're using Megaverse and Flames, actually kind of an odd pick, but for player characters going into Poland in a Megaverse and Flames kind of style campaign, I would actually say this might be a good excuse for some Arthurian knights from New Camelot to be being sent on a quest, maybe to go help strengthen Tarnow's defenses in some sort of trade agreement between New Camelot and Tarnow. That would give characters, English-speaking characters with a more fantasy bent, with a clear-cut mission and reason to be adventuring together, to go to this place and be trying to stand up, and then discover that Tarnow's leadership is kind of fucked up and everything's fucked up, but through the power of brotherhood and friendship, and because it's all about family kind of a thing, they'll be able to help save Poland and all that kind of stuff. England's good for that. Also, it's got the essential core original description from Millennium Trees. So if you want to do anything with the evil Millennium Tree and the Black Forest in Germany, something to reference. Also, some of the OCCs and alien races in here are also relevant to the European setting, although some of them might be a little too warm weather for Poland. Also, if you're going to be using Megaverse and Flames, you're going to want to factor in what Pharaoh Ramesset and the Phoenix Empire are up to. So you'll want a copy of Risk Africa. As referencing back to the thing I was saying about how they have Romanized Wolfen in Italy, perhaps they could be like a burgeoning puppet client state of the new Phoenix Empire, since they are a monster race, and they could be supplying them with mega damage armor and weapons and stuff, and so they'll use them as kind of a way to keep an eye on the situation without directly sticking their finger in until Pharaoh Ramesset decides exactly whose side he wants to take in the whole conflict. So if you want to delve a bit more into the Wolfen Empire, picking up the Wolfen Empire book from the Palladium fantasy series of books, you can cheat and just basically port a lot of the information about its political structure and even the NPCs just over to Italy instead of the northern territory of the Palladium world, if you don't want to have to spend a whole lot of time inventing something from scratch. And that's basically it. I mean, if you're going to do Megaverse and Flames, you're obviously going to want to have the Hades and Devol World Dimension books, because they'll give you all your stats and info on them. And other than that, yeah, the main rule book, and that's about it. But the actual core, essential, the books you need the most, you want the 3 Russian books, Sovietsky, Warlords of Russia, and Mystic Russia. You'll want Mindworks, and then you'll want the 2 Triax books. And that's enough. So go away now. Bye.